I break things up into seasons. Like this quarter's for content producing and this quarter's for marketing. And I'd be like, what? You can't do both at the same time? And now I kind of get it.
The first question that comes to mind is how much time am I wasting on stuff that's not actually selling more books?
Come back to editing. I feel like for me, I know a lot of people hate editing. I actually really like editing because that's, for me, is where the magic actually happens. Like that.
Welcome everybody to the BookFunnel Podcast. This is our first episode of what is hopefully going to be many. I am joined today by my two co-hosts, Kelli Tanzi and Emma Alisyn. Say hi.
Hello.
Everybody. Right. And this is something we've been talking about for quite some time now, getting this podcast going. We used to do some live Q&As on Zoom, and there were a few of those that afterwards, I remember us talking about it after those Q&As had finished, to be like, we should just turn this into a podcast. We're sitting around talking here for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
What are we doing? And now we've finally gotten around to it. And I don't know about you, but I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this. So we're going to quickly kind of do a little bit of overview. Since this is the first one, I want to give everybody an idea of what to expect from the podcast, what we're going to be including, kind of some of the returning or regular segments we're going to have. And then, yeah, we'll just kind of go from there. So first of all, this podcast is intended for self-published authors, traditionally published authors, aspiring authors, people at all stages of their author career. But there might also be some relevant stuff for some readers in this podcast as well. We're going to have some regular self-publishing tips that we share. And when we have guests on, obviously, there will be some relevant tips that they might share from their experience. We'll be talking about all different kinds of topics related to self-publishing, the full range. We have all kinds of ideas that we've been talking about. We're going to pull questions from some of our users of BookFunnel and kind of answer those questions on here as well, because I think it's really relevant to do so. And then we're also going to be talking about what I'm going to call the story behind the story, which when we have guests on is how did they get here in their career? What are they currently doing creatively? And actually let them talk about the creative aspects of their writing. Maybe get a little crafty with it there a little bit too, talk about some of those things. So, which might be relevant to readers, and they might be interested in that sort of thing as well. So that's going to be kind of the structure of these podcasts, but we're always going to play it by ear. And I think, as we go forward, after we finish today, it'll be really interesting to see where this goes, because I think it could be lots of fun. We also want to keep it relevant to you and bring on some authors who are maybe a little bit more relatable to kind of the average author, right? We there's lots of authors out there that we'd like to talk to that have relevant experience, that you don't have to be making six figures as a self-published author to have something to say. So anyway, that's the introduction to the podcast and what it's going to be. I think we'll just kind of dive right in here to our first segment for today and get on that conversation, and then we'll just take it away from there. So it's time for our tips from the trenches segment. This is going to be our first segment today. And in this segment, we're going to just share and discuss some of our own self-publishing tips from our own personal experience as authors. Some of you may know that all of us, each of us, Emma, Kelli, and myself, are all self-published authors of varying degrees of notoriety. And so we have some experience that we want to share, but we're obviously also the BookFunnel author support team. And so we have some relevant advice from there as well that we're going to share in this segment. And these tips are going to be kind of not all over the place, but they're going to come. I don't necessarily know what tips are going to be shared here. I haven't necessarily shared my tips with the other two, so we'll have all kinds of some variety here as well. Who wants to go first? Who wants to go first?
Who's gonna fall on the sword?
I think since you said it, Emma, I think that's you.
Okay. Kelli may need more thinking time too, but let's not wave that word notorious around. On wood. We're almost through the end of the year and it's been pretty smooth. There have been no author dramas.
Yeah.
I don't think any major ones, but okay, so tips from the trenches. I was actually thank you, Sky Warren, loved it, but I peeked into her webinar, I think last week, a week or two ago. And I think the general topic was just wrapping up 2025, or was it surviving quarter 4. So if you get on her newsletter, Sky Warren, she's popular, fabulous romance author, contemporary romance. She'll occasionally do webinars and things for authors. And there's an author newsletter, so highly recommend that. But her tip for quarter 4, and those of you who are not in the US right now, we're going through a brutal election cycle in conjunction with the holidays. And her advice, which I've been thinking about for the last week, intellection is number 11, it does like to think, is to not fight it, especially with the holiday season. So when it comes to packaging your books, your current content, maybe you don't have time, the bandwidth to create a whole new holiday novella. Well, slap a Santa hat and a bow on what you got and just switch the marketing around and slide on in there into that reader attention. So kind of, just go with the flow instead of fighting it like, hey, I've got Wolf Shifter over here, or I've got Dark Mafia over here, but everybody's doing Christmas. Well, no, just finagle that a bit. I am paraphrasing in my words. So
Well, no, that's fine. I think really, I write science fiction.
yeah.
So the idea of like writing a specific Christmas story,
Sci-fi Christmas story.
it doesn't even compute. Now you could, in certain sci-fi settings, you could.
Yeah.
Right.
Might be a fun thing to try.
Yeah. Near future, for example. But what I see a lot of sci-fi authors do when they do that, they're like, oh, well, this is like the analog holiday to Christmas. And I don't know. I can't bring myself to do it. But no, I think that's a good tip. Just because there's lots of ways that you could package up your books in a holiday theme, even if they aren't specifically holiday related, right? Like even the way you do something like direct sales, I'm sure you have even more flexibility because you could do like a holiday, gift box set or something like that at a special price. And the holiday aspect of it is the way you're packaging it, not the content of the books themselves. That makes sense.
Exactly.
I could see that working. I could see that working.
Yeah, no, she specifically mentioned that too, how you can take some of your current content and repackage it if you can. She was like, and I appreciate she's very practical, pragmatic. She's like, don't rush out and like commission a whole bazillion-dollar holiday special edition cover. But if you've got something, if there's a nice pre-made, if there's something, package that, make a box set, special edition for this holiday, and see what happens.
Yeah. Exactly. Kelli, you came with a tip, right? You got one.
I did come with a tip. I did. So I was thinking about my own writing process and how I was, when I first started out, I haven't been doing this as long as either of you. I would sit and just think and overthink every chapter, every paragraph, and it would take me forever to get anything on the screen, basically just type anything out. And then I was like cutting half of that out. Like I would process so much information, and then later when I was going back and editing, I realized I gotta take that whole chapter is gone. Like it doesn't need to be there. So my tip has been, get words on the paper, don't make them perfect. Don't don't like overthink, overprocess. Don't spend 2 days on a chapter. Get the chapter out onto the screen or onto the page, and then move on. And then when you come back to editing, I feel like for me, I know a lot of people hate editing. I actually really like editing, because that's, for me, is where the magic actually happens. Like that's where I make my characters really come to life and sing, and I put in those better words. I use more interesting words, and I have better descriptions. And if I overthink all those heavy descriptions and then later realize I'm just gonna throw this out anyway, so
Yeah.
and I realize, and part of this is, if you know Becca Syme, we all know Becca Syme. Oops, sorry. We all know Becca Syme. One of the things I realized when I took one of her courses was that I'm not a plotter. I'm a pantser. And when you're pantsing, you're just following the spark, is what my coach had told me. Follow the spark, and you just put the stuff on the page. And for me, that actually changed everything. I'm actually kind of in between plotting and pantsing. But man, I would sit and do organized outlines and just really detailed, and then I'd throw them away because when I
Yeah.
got to the keyboard, that's where my real intellection started going, ooh, I can do this now. So I think, getting the words on the page, and then if you take a U-turn in your story, you go back and go, well, I got to take that whole part out. At least you didn't spend so much time on it. So
Right.
that's my tip. That's what I
No,
got.
I think that's really easy to fall into, just overthinking. I think the king of overthink, the person that comes to my mind, and I don't know this necessarily for a fact, but I suspect it based on what they've said, is George R.R. Martin. And
Yeah.
that it takes so long because he's like having to decide what's going to happen. And I'm more of the person that just I tend to be a plotter. I used to be a pantser. I'm more of a plotter now, but I just go. And then if something changes in the moment, that's fine. And I think it's very easy to fall into that overthinking. Uh,
Yeah. Well, then I would overthink the outline. And then when I get to that actual, writing of that chapter, I'm like, wait, this is better. And then
yeah.
I've just tossed out like the next part of my outline. And so, that's so I guess they call them like what, plansters or something, where you actually like, where you plot like, um, the main pieces, like the main arc, you give like this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then you get there in those places. And sometimes that
Right.
changes too, but at least I didn't spend days coming up with an outline and then like toss it out. So
That happened. That kind of happened to me the other day, actually. I was in the middle of writing a chapter, and I realized, oh, the way these two characters are going to interact is not what I thought it was going to be. It should be totally different. And I kind of surprised myself, and for that reason, I feel like to the reader it would kind of be like a pleasant surprise as well, like expecting some sort of confrontation, and then one character does something a little unexpected but not out of character. And so yeah, I've run into that myself. You have to be open to those moments of inspiration.
sometimes that makes the best story though, right? Like that when it comes to you and you're like, wait, I had that happen where I had a whole entire character. I was just gonna kill him off, and now he's the main character of my next story. So
Yeah, I think
and I'm
that a
writing
lot
two
of
books
writers,
for him.
a lot of writers that happens to, though. I've heard like all kinds of different like characters on TV shows that were only supposed to be there for one season, but the fans loved them, and so they stuck around. Emma, are you a plotter or a pantser? I don't know if we've had that discussion before.
I am, and it's funny because I used to freelance plot, and I've studied so many plot systems, and I can plot like a winch, but I'm a plancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so, because I was not like that at the beginning, but I transitioned and I'm not even sure when the transition happened.
Mhm.
Um, no, actually, I think about 2 to 3 years ago when I finally started writing fantasy romance, and my characters were like, "Yeah, you're cute, but we're gonna take
gonna
her
do
now." And I'm
this.
like, "Oh, plotting? That's not
Yeah.
working anymore." But yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a place for both of them. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think maybe our processes might be a little bit similar, Kelly, because I'm very much get the first draft done, and I always worry with each book that the book is going to suck. And by the end, I'm like, you shouldn't have, you're okay. But it's that process of getting the words down and then going back and layering. I'm like on my 7th layer for my current work in progress right now. Yeah, they won't shut up. But every time my strengths have me go back, I think it's maximizer and intellection and sometimes strategic. They'll nudge me. They'll be like, no, there's this little thing. We need to go back and pull that thread a bit more. And they're always right.
Yeah.
I hate them so much.
So my tip has just changed because I came here with one, and it's a perfectly good tip. But I think in light of what Kelly has said, this is come up, and maybe this will also kind of connect to our main topic here that we're going to transition to in a little bit. It's the clay pots theory, or the clay pots experiment. If you look this up, this was an actual experiment that was done. I'd have to look this up because I didn't come prepared with this. I'm just remembering this now, where they took uh, two classes of students taking a pottery class. I think this was at the college level. Right? So they have two groups of students, and their goal is to create a perfect pot in this certain style that meets these exact specifications. And one group is told that that's the goal and that you have to make a perfect pot. Your goal is to make one perfect pot by the end of this semester. And the other class is actually not told that that's the goal at all. And instead, they are told a different goal, which is you have to make as many pots as possible before the end of the semester. And they're not told, I mean, they're shown the instructions, like they're given an example of what it's supposed to look like, but they're not told you have to make a perfect one. You have to make one exactly like that. They're told, yeah, just make as many as you possibly can. And they keep track over the length of the semester. And obviously, the group that's told to make as many as they possibly can, they make way more pots than the group that was told you have to make one perfect pot by the end of this semester. There was only one perfect pot that was made between all of those students in both classes. And it was not in the group that was told you had to make a perfect pot. It was from the other class that was told, make as many as you possibly can. And in fact, just even in terms of how, even the ones that weren't perfect, how close they got to that, that level of perfection, if you will, if you can even say that, but how close they got to sort of what they were supposed to be aiming for, that group that was making more pots, they got closer to the actual end goal anyway. And so I think for authors, there's something that rings true there. And maybe, Emma, when you said, like, I'm really worried the book is going to suck, you probably have a few books that suck, right?
Well, oddly enough, my current WIP used to be a novella, which was my first NaNoWriMo. It was like 10, 12 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And reading what it was then and bringing it up to my current, that's totally maximizer probably.
Yeah.
Now I can totally see the evolution of my
Of your
skill,
writing.
everything, not just the
Yeah.
technical prose, but like the characterization, the way I interweave the threads. And I'm like, I kind of understand the old trad model of write, keep writing, and then submit, because there's something to be said for doing it over and over again before you actually. But now we're D, so we can just go back and publish.
You're like, I'm just going to fix this now. It's good. It's fine.
I think with self-publishing, though, I think that mindset actually lends itself better to the write and just keep writing and just push it out there and just put it out in the world than traditional publishing necessarily does for some folks. I don't know. I'm sure it's different for each person, but when you can just write a book and obviously do all the things that you need to do to get it up to a certain level of quality, right? Even in terms of editing and so forth. I'm not saying just like slap words on a page and throw it up on Amazon, but just the fact that you can do that and then you can move on to the next thing. And if that book sucks, well, okay. There were certain seasons of my favorite TV shows that sucked, right? And I kept watching them, right? It's really bad if it's the last one. That's, I guess, where you gotta be careful, right? If you're ending a series, you don't want to end it on a bad one. But I don't know. I thought that was relevant. I thought that was just
I thought it was really interesting when I was taking that course with Becca Syme's group. My coach was kind of like, it's okay if you just put garbage. I almost said something I shouldn't have. You just put garbage.
Yeah.
It's okay. It was almost like I didn't need permission, but it kind of felt like I got permission. It wasn't really it was my own permission. Like I gave myself permission to go, I could do that. And then I can come back and make it better later. And I think it was very freeing, like that moment of like, oh, I don't have to have the entire book plotted out right yet. I don't have to know, all the middle stuff. I usually know the ending, but I don't know all the middle stuff. And sometimes that's what do they call that? The middle, gosh, there's like a term for it, but the gray area of your story. And she's like, just follow the spark, just go. And it was like, oh, so that's my tip.
Yep.
So
yeah, no, absolutely. All right, now on to today's topic. We are going to be discussing the 80-20 rule and how does it apply to authors. So the 80-20 rule is like an old axiom, right? The idea being, like, if we're going to define it here for those who may not know, 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort is the idea. And I think this is actually a good segue from what we were just talking about, even. I think naturally, unplanned, but naturally here. What does that mean for authors? I think the first question that comes to mind is, how much time am I wasting on stuff that's not actually selling more books, right? That's the first thing that comes to my mind, because I think there's a lot of distractions, especially for self-published authors, because you have to do a lot of it yourself anyway. And so it's like, well, you need a mailing list, and then there's social media, and well, you can also, get audiobook versions of your book. There's AI narration now, so you can do it yourself, right? And you can do all these other things. There's so many other things that you can do. And what are you actually seeing results from at the end of the day? That's when I'm more concerned with the the other 80% of my efforts that are not producing, to reverse the rule, the 20-80, the 20% of my results that are coming from 80% of my time and effort.
I think I lost that. You're gonna have to cut that.
I'm leaving it in, Kelly. I'm leaving it.
No.
Yeah, I really do want the cut gavel thingy.
I know where I was gonna go. So I was thinking about like how it's easy to get distracted by the things, especially as a romance author, that are pretty, like covers. And yeah, or like going into Canva and making a new ad or creating something, and how much time that actually takes to like, okay, I'm gonna go searching through and find a photo, stock image, and then I'm gonna create this and I'll put a background and this. And I tried Photoshop, which was like, what am I doing? I don't know Photoshop, right? Like I tried putting together, just basic covers or basic things. I'm like, no, I'm gonna pay somebody to do that because that's, how it should, like,
Mhm.
I'm not that skilled. But then, you go into groups, and I don't know if this is something that sci-fi maybe doesn't see, but I know Emma knows this. There's just groups that are like cover designers or cover designers that you follow on Facebook. And they're
Yeah.
like, here's this $60 cover and it's beautiful and it's perfect. And they'll do this beautiful. And I'm like, ooh, there's a pretty, and what is that really getting me if I don't have a book for it yet?
Yeah.
Like, so I'm guilty of buying covers that have no home. Uh,
Well, it could be inspiration to write something though. If
Yeah,
you,
I mean, I have the stories plotted in my head, but
right.
like at least, as we talked about, like just they're there. But and they're still brewing. I take a lot of brewing time, right? Like I need
Yeah.
that intellection is really into like I'll just sit and stare off into space and be like thinking about things. So then I'll see a cover and I'll be like, ooh, that would be perfect. But like that book is way down the road, but
Right.
I'm scrolling through, this wonderful cover designer's work and like, ooh, click, maybe I should buy this one. Like,
Right. Kind of funny side note here, and Kelly, this maybe I shouldn't mention this because this might feed your cover addiction then.
uh-oh.
Uh, which BookFunnel is very gracious and reimburses us for some of our self-publishing expenses. So have you?
I have taken advantage of that for my cover addiction.
That's
80
what I was gonna ask.
your
Oh.
husband for
It's
covers too. Yes.
Yep.
Well, hey, but BookFunnel, and Damon and Julie, who obviously own BookFunnel, started it, are very gracious in that regard, and they do help us out a little bit there. So, but
Everyone
yes, I could see that when you mentioned that, like,
wonder if we're actually publishing the books we're buying covers for.
I don't think they don't need to know. They don't need to know.
Shh.
No, I actually am planning on commissioning some covers. I usually have like covers a few books in advance, just because I find that it actually does personally motivate me
Yeah.
Yeah.
to do that, and I'm paying somebody else, so it's not like it's costing me the time to make the cover and like go into. I could see if somebody does their own covers themselves, where you
Yeah.
might like wait until you finish the book, and that might be more efficient. But since I'm commissioning it, uh, I actually have a good relationship with my cover artist, and I tell him, "This is my generic idea. Just do something." And then I'll often take what he did, like if he's making some sort of spaceship for me or something like that. I'll give him a few details, but most of the time it's like, do whatever you want. And then whatever you make, that's what I'll describe in the book because it's easier that way. And yeah. Say actually, it's efficient. If we're on the topic of efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, a lot of people get bogged down in trying to do all the things, all the social medias, all of the, I have to do a Facebook group and I have to do,
Yeah.
Facebook ads and Amazon ads and just putting it up Amazon ads can take a half a day, I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, especially when you're getting started, and Facebook too, they seem very complicated when you're first getting started. And, then they're posting TikToks and to be clear, like TikTok can really bring in, especially for romance
Mhm.
writers. And I'm sure there are other, my algorithm is just romance, right? Book talk
Yeah.
and romance, but that can be really efficient. And so I have known people that's their market. They might put up Facebook ads too, but they are diligently making TikToks every day. And if that's the thing that's bringing in your income and bringing in or they have a system too. Like one of the things I've seen is they reuse old TikToks and bring them back and
Yeah.
post them again. And so, but they have a system of how they work that. And they're very, very effective if that's it. So do you need a Facebook group or do you want this TikTok?
Yeah.
Is that your regime that you're going to spend your 20 on? Because if that's what's bringing in your sales and doing the bulk of your marketing, then that's great. That's what you should do. But you don't have to do all the things. Maybe
Yeah.
find the one. If it's being on Facebook and being present all the time on Facebook and getting readers that way, then that's where you should,
Right.
put that time.
I also think you shouldn't feel guilty about trying something out and then realizing it's not going to work and just abandoning it.
Yeah.
I took HB90 this year for the first time. Love it. It's so eye-opening. It forces you to really come to grips with how much time you have. But what came out of that, a major goal for me, was TikTok. And I was so enthused, like, I'm gonna do this. And I hired a lovely lady off Etsy who made a bunch of videos for me, high quality, beautiful. I hired a narrator to narrate some quotes. I have all these parts and I still haven't put them together and got on TikTok. Because I keep going back to I just need to write right now. I'm just in that phase of my business where I've published 2 books this year, and that's wonderful. Emma's not having that. Emma wants a minimum of 5, or my students are like, what are you doing? You need more content, which I know Becca would say QTP. Do you really need more content? But yeah, that talk, man.
I think that brings up what my thought was, which is if you're spending that 20% of your time that's actually maximizing your results, like, and not just in the short term, in the long term, should you just put the majority of your time into your writing and then surround that with maybe 1 or 2 other things to promote the stuff that you've written? Like, if you just like focused on, okay, I'm going to spend most of my time writing, and then I'm going to have a mailing list, and then I'm going to do Facebook ads, and I've got those dialed in, and that's it. And I'm not going to do the other stuff. I think you could do well with that and save yourself some time and some money. Right.
That's the dream. We all here have day jobs too.
Well, I think it's relevant too if you do have a day job, because you don't have as much room.
And I mean,
almost think
HBD forces you to look at that, like, you've got a whole day job. Thank you, Becca, so much, because she's like, some of you all need a job, take some of the pressure off publishing, and that's what I did by coming to BookFunnel, and best decision I've ever made. But it's like, in theory, it's like, okay, 80% writing, 20% marketing sounds nice on paper. Kelli and I have learned the hard way over our last year with BookFunnel
the flexibility of the time and everything is wonderful. Like, that isn't something that everybody gets in their job. Like, I'm a former teacher. I didn't write when I was teaching, because that's part of the reason I never did pick up the pen and start writing, was because I didn't have time. I had small kids, and when you get home, you're doing dinner, you're doing this, you got bath times, you got bedtimes, you've got all of those things, and your energy pennies, we just love Becca here. Your energy pennies are gone. And that, even with this flexibility of a job, it's really difficult, because when I do have time where I could step away and do other thgo I am still dealing with my family, I got to go to the doctor. I got to go do, the kids need shoes. I got to go to the shoe store. Like, that kind of stuff is always going to be there as well. And you can't let that go. So when you do have that tiny bit of time to carve away to write or do admin work for your own business, that is really tough. Like, that's where if I'm going to have to let something go, and this is what I struggle with having a full-time job and doing the writing, is, what do I let go in order to do it? Is it sleep? Because I think it might be sleep.
Yeah.
I think it actually is sleep for me. I'm like writing at, like, when I should be sleeping. And so, and sometimes I just don't write, like, my pennies are gone, and then I don't do any of it. So that's the trick that I'm still, like, struggling through. And even though we've had quite an adjustment period, I think for anybody that's out there that's got a full-time job, you got to give yourself a little grace. Like, this isn't easy.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
another job.
no, it is. It is another job. And as like what I've struggled with before is like I'll get into a groove, and for a few months, I can balance everything. I'm like, I've got my day job over here and family and my writing, and it's all going great. And
And Jack, you have little ones too, don't you? So
I
yeah,
do, I
we all
do.
have
So,
children and
right,
very
right.
busy.
I've got a 4-year-old, an 18-month-old, and a 10-year-old. So, and between doctor's appointments and all kinds of other stuff, and just the regular personal stuff and all those things, and then a day job, which is incredibly demanding. They put so much on my plate, and no, I'm being a little facetious.
Made him start a podcast.
No, no, BookFunnel is a great job. It is, and we are given a degree of flexibility that not a lot of other people have, and I don't take that for granted at all. But it's still a job at the end of the day, and there's still work involved. And honestly, sometimes the flexibility of it means that like you, it's just spread out more throughout the day and not
Yeah.
just concentrated, which is a different kind of thing. And so yeah, those energy pennies, that's your 20% of your time that you have to see results from. But I would get in a groove for a few months, and then something would happen and I get knocked out of the groove, and I know what knocked me out of it. Like in hindsight, I went back and I'm weird like this. Like I have a few months there where I was like producing lots of words, I was releasing books, it was going really well. And then what is it that happened? And I figured it out, and it was something personal actually. And because the job and the writing were fine, and then it was this personal event that happened, and it's just like it all just fell apart. And whatever that happens, being able to see that kind of stuff, I think is important. But when I was in a groove, what I was doing was and I don't know that this is the actual name for this, but I was goal stacking. I've talked about this once before. Or like I have two goals that are unrelated to each other, and I essentially try to merge them together so that I am accomplishing two things at literally the same time. So I want to write more, right? I also could stand to lose a few pounds, right? Um, no big deal. It is a big deal. But so I'm like, okay, what if I write on my phone while I'm walking on the treadmill? And that's what got me into that groove, because to my brain it was like I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm accomplishing two things at once here. So the motivation was like double. It was like, oh, I'm not in the mood to write today, but if I don't write, I'm not going to get my steps in. Okay, I'm going. And then I did it. And then the writing was fine, and it worked, and I got my steps in. And I think where you can do that, you can't do that with everything, but where you can, you should maybe try to lean into that, because it's like I was spending the same amount of time. I was going to do both of those things anyway, and I just did them at the same time for efficiency's
And
sake.
by writing on your phone, do you mean dictation?
No,
Oh,
No, remember, Jack doesn't do that.
with my thumbs. No, I went down a whole rabbit hole because Emma is a dictation wizard, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I've done a little bit of it. It was it's something I want to commit some more time to again in the near future, because there are definitely some times it's like when this is going to sound weird. Like when I'm driving, there are times when I'm driving where I'm like, I could dictate something right now. It'd be hands free. And I do have to spend a good deal of time driving, like pick up my son and take him to appointments and things like that. Um, so that was one of my thoughts. But no, I was on the treadmill. It would have been really weird to be at the gym. And that was the other thing. I had to go to the gym. I have I got a treadmill, bought it from my neighbor. They did a garage sale. It was a $50 treadmill. Have it right here next to me in the basement. And I've been trying to use that, and I have, and it's convenient because it's like here at the house. But then just the other day, I went back to the gym to do it instead. I was like, oh, this is why this worked so well. I'm in another environment. There's no distractions.
Mhm.
And I'm achieving these two goals at the same time. Look at me. I'm so special. It worked. It worked in a way that, I was trying to like force it in a different way. I thought, oh, I could change this and make it more efficient. I can do it here at home. And I didn't realize that actually it was being at home that was a distraction. So I think there's things you overlook sometimes too. When like you've gotten into a groove and then you fall out of it, it takes some time, and you have to give yourself the time to figure out how you got in the groove in the first place, and then what knocked you out of it, and so you can maintain that. Because I think when if you are spending a good deal of your time on stuff that's not bringing you much in return, it's not motivating. And that's where you give up. Because if I were to tell you, okay, all you have to do to make $1 million is to write for 3 hours a day, you'd be like,
Stop.
okay, I'm gonna go do it. Right now, it's not that simple, right? I'm saying if I could wave a magic wand and that's all you had to do, you'd be really motivated to do it. It's not that simple. There's more steps to the process, but if you did want to make $1 million as an author, you probably should be writing for at least some portion of your day, whatever that happens to be, whether it's 3 hours or not.
That's not really a far-fetched scenario because we all see the screenshots in various groups. We're like, I made quadrillion figures this year, and you can too with a $20,000 ad spend, and this is how I got here.
Yep.
But then when it comes to that hour of writing and you have no energy pennies, like Kelli says, and you remind yourself, if I just get up, if I just do the words, sometimes that's just not the reality
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to cut yourself some slack too. I don't think that you can expect yourself to be on point 100% of the time. Even when I was in the groove, there were days where I missed a writing session. But then like I was motivated. So like if I missed a writing session on Wednesday, like that weekend, because I was in the groove, I would like be like, sorry, honey, I'm going to the gym for an hour. Right. And I would go, right. Because even though I had missed a session and I wasn't perfect throughout the entire week, I was still motivated enough to try to stay on course. And I think understanding that I'm not going to necessarily be perfect all the way through, but if I can at least stay on course, that's what matters. And I think that's where I got thrown off. And well, I had to get myself back on course. I'm doing that, and I'm in the middle of doing that right now. But I think when it comes down to it, the best advice that I've ever gotten as an author and a writer is to just always be working on your next book. And I think that's related to the 80-20 rule. Because if you're not writing something more, and you're not producing something new, there's so much that I think maybe we don't realize. Like when you have a new release that's coming out, and to readers, what that signals to them is that you're going to be a reliable source of content, and then they behave differently toward you than if you've been pushing the same 3 books you wrote 5 years ago, and you've got an idea for a story, but you haven't set aside the time. And I'm not trying to judge anybody here because everybody's situation is different. But if you took stock of your situation, are you making progress on the next book? And if you are, I think you should count that as ultimately what's going to lead to your results in the future.
Yeah. I think with motivation too, sometimes it's nice for some of us. I don't know if it's for like how you guys feel, but like I need external pressure. I
Mhm.
need something, or even if it's just a writing partner who's like, yo, have you did anything today? Like
Yeah.
that sort of like outside pressure. Because if it's just me, it's me going, oh, well, I'm too tired today, or I've got to do this other thing, or I got to, you know, look at book covers. Uh, like you start going like, I could put it off. And I find that like that external pressure of someone or something, deadlines or whatever, some people don't do well with deadlines. And some people like really thrive with them. So if that's something that you need, that might be a good thing to try to do. Maybe find writing groups or something like that. I know there's like Discord channels where people are just doing writing sprints.
Yeah.
And I need to do those, because that sort of thing where I'm just like, what was that? For the Words? You've played that, Emma, haven't you? For the Words. It's great. It's a great little like, I don't know if you know what it is. It's like a little gamification of putting words down. So there's
Mhm.
like little monsters and you get coins, and you have to type for 60 words in 5 minutes, or you have to do, and you have these little monsters you battle with your words. And then I just copy and paste it, put it back into Scrivener. And just that kind of gamification can just be like,
Yeah.
I got a cookie at the end of, like, I got something that is keeping me going. And it's not like I'm, like I have to beat the monster. It's more of like I can sit here and do 200 words in 15 minutes or whatever it is. And it's just that giving me that timetable. I like that. So
Yeah.
that's a
No,
fun
yeah.
little
I
thing.
might have to check that out. I might have to check that.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool little site.
When you
I
start
think
spending money to dress your avatar.
Yeah, I only spend the money that is for like the basic, but yeah, make your avatar look cute, I guess.
right, right.
She does have wings, yeah.
That's something really key though, Jack, and it could be a whole segment, but the environment switch, especially if we're
Yeah.
talking 80/20 and analyzing what might have gone wrong. I recently did an environment switch and I was a diehard work from home girly. But then I went out, I got a timeshare, that's not the right word, in a co-op office, and my productivity.
Mhm.
I'm
And
thinking
then,
Yeah.
about doing something similar. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
know a lot of people go to like coffee shops and stuff, and it's the same idea. You go to a coffee shop, you can't wander around and you can't go do laundry. You can't,
Yeah.
you're working. And I have found that when I go and change my environment that is public sometimes, that helps as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
especially
Well,
if
no,
you're
after we record this, I'm going back to the gym. And I'm working there. It's not, I'm going to be, getting some exercise in, but I'm also working at the same time. Absolutely. I think a change of environment can be very helpful, especially if you are somebody who works from home. Yeah. Now, as far as the 80/20 rule is concerned, the other thing that comes to mind is, what are the things that you need to cut out? So obviously you can focus on like, okay, what's the most productive thing I can do with my 20% of my time, right? And then, the other 80% is whatever. But what happens when that other 80% like pushes over and becomes like 90%, 95%? And it's right. How do you identify that? How do you eliminate it? And maybe what are some of the things that you've noticed for yourself? For me, I'm an overcommitter sometimes. And like, I'll like, oh, I've got this idea. I'm going to do this thing. And there's a graveyard of things that like I started and then kind of abandoned. And what was
What
that?
was that?
you must have activator.
Yeah, I think I do. It's in there. I did do the strengths test at one point, but I'm not as obsessed about it as you both are, but that's fine. Uh,
You didn't take a
but
class.
no, I haven't yet. I know, shame on me. But I look back at some of those things, and it's easy to really feel guilty, like, oh, I abandoned that thing. But it's like, but there's a reason I didn't have the time to put into it, and it wasn't yielding the results that I wanted. It was like a fun little thing that like I did on a weekend, and that was great. But then after that, I had no drive to continue it because it actually wasn't bringing me results. And then maybe, someday I'll hire a VA to do that for me, or something like that. It's not like I want to abandon it forever, but I know when it comes to things like my newsletter, for example, I have, I'm coming to a point where I'm kind of reassessing what I'm doing with that, because for a long time too, I was, we have to give advice to authors as well. And there's a lot of things I've maximized in there. And I feel like my newsletter, and I think a lot of authors can fall into this trap where it hasn't been serving me. And I've been do it like the BookFunnel promos and so forth that I've been participating in. I've shifted some of the focus to that. And now I'm at this point where like, okay, I've been doing a pretty good job of keeping it balanced. But I like when it comes time to like sit down and do it, I'm feeling that like, oh, I know I've got to do this, but do I have to? Like, do I actually have to do this? And this is not to say that BookFunnel promos aren't worth your time. They definitely are. I'm just doing it at such a degree. I was participating in so many that I think what I've realized is, I want to step back and not just prove a point to people that you can participate in a dozen promos and actually share them effectively, which is kind of the point I was trying to prove. I think I've proven that point, and I realized like, okay, I can step back from that now, and I could just focus on like doing less, still with good quality, and maybe even focusing on that quality aspect of it, and less volume, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about how much time it takes because you were not just participating in them, you were actually hosting them. So
Right.
that is a lot of your time. That's a lot of time that you're not writing. But I mean, they're still worth it if you're
Yeah.
building your newsletter and you're doing that. But I think when we talk about Jack was doing was like most authors are in, 2 or 3 promos, maybe they host a few, or, maybe some are doing that maximizing. But Jack was
Yeah.
like, every Friday, here's a bunch, like he really was maximizing that. So I could see where after a certain point out of the 80-20, what is that, what does that look like?
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
and like I have a dedicated website for it now.
Yeah.
Free Books Friday is where I do it, and I've actually taken a couple weeks off from it because I wanted to take a step back and assess what am I doing with this, and where do I want this to go, because I'm going down this path and it feels like, do I need to pump the brakes? Do I need to go over here? What do I need to do? I don't want to abandon this,
Well,
but
everything season though, and I've heard for years it's the older I get, the more I go back and remember stuff people told me. I'm like, yeah, I get that now. Growing up
Mhm.
is great, but I used to hear authors say I break things up into seasons. Like this quarter is for content producing and this quarter is for marketing, and I'd be like, what? You can't do both at the same time. And now I kind of get it. I
Yeah.
kind of get it. So
Yeah. No,
maybe
I get that
the
too.
content season.
Yeah. No, I think for me, like the summer is definitely not the season for writing because I work from home and my kids are home more than they are during the school year. And it just, yeah, I want to spend time with them and focus on them. It's not even me complaining that they're around. That's not it. It's that when they're here, I want to spend time with them and do stuff with them and create memories with them. And that means I have to, you know, I
Yeah.
have to kind of divide things up.
I think that's one of the things that we've noticed just in support. And I noticed this, I don't know if Emma's noticed, like as we're going into, support and working through, what authors are asking questions about. I noticed there was a real like lull in the summer. I think that's really common. A lot of the summer time, people are out, they're going on vacations, they're spending time with their kids, they're not writing as much. And I think when you get into fall, like today is like a chilly day here, and I'm like cozying up, and I'm like, ooh, this would be a good time to go get some words in, you know.
This
Like,
this reminds me actually of something, which is some of the cultural differences that are the product of agriculture. So hear me out here. Right? It's like what? So different crops require different care, right? Essentially. And so if you're farming a crop like corn or wheat, your busiest times of the year are planting season and harvest. And then there's a lot of lull in between, right? Other crops are not the same way. Rice, namely, requires constant tending and attention in order for to produce a healthy crop. And there are, if you're a rice farmer, you're going to have a different lifestyle than somebody who is farming corn and wheat, right?
Mm.
And I think all that's a totally different topic for conversation, but to bring that into the perspective of authors, what crop are you producing, right? What crop are you farming as an author?
And
And
what season are you in?
right.
As Emma was saying, yeah.
And if you fight that, you know, you need to maybe you need to let the ground heal for a season.
Foul.
Maybe right, you need to reintroduce some nutrients back into the soil and you let it, you know, go wild for a year, or all, you know, there's crop rotations and all those things that farmers do. I think that's a great way to think of writing, especially when it comes to like your motivation, the seasons you go through, and to allow yourself in certain seasons to be like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to be writing as much during this season because I'm focused on something else, or I need to take this, like, this is the winter for my writing career right now, and everything's going to be a little dormant for a while, and that's okay. And in the long term, that's going to make me more productive, even if right now I feel like I'm not. So I'm always good for a seemingly irrelevant anecdote. That will be
All
one of the themes of this podcast. We'll keep this kind of stuff.
you
I was
got to
like,
think long term, though. I think we tell authors that a lot, especially the newer ones who come through panic. Like, I'm launching this one really niche book and I want to take over TikTok. And like, slow down, darling.
Yeah,
This is
pick
going to
one thing.
be a game. It's going to be a long game, you know.
exactly. Exactly. All
Yeah.
right. So we are going to move along here to our next segment. And this is going to be another recurring segment here on the podcast. The BookFunnel mailbag. We're going to have some questions here for the team to answer. We're going to answer your questions as well. For today, I've actually pulled some questions from one of our recent webinars, but for future podcasts, we'll be able to pull questions directly from the comments. So if you have a question that you want to be featured in the next episode of the podcast, because there will be one, there will be a next episode. You can comment here on YouTube. It would actually mean a lot. If there are no comments, I get sad. So please do leave a question, even if you think it's silly, because it'll make me feel better and all that. So, you know, I'm all kidding aside. We will be taking questions here from the channel, and it will help us out. So if you do have a question, or even if like it's a question that you maybe know the answer to, but you're like, this would probably be a good question for other authors to hear the answer to, then you can put it in the comments here on the channel. So I'm pulling these from our webinar that we did yesterday on writing better blurbs. A couple of these are going to be related to blurbs, but then we're also going to be there's a couple others mixed in here. And then Emma and Kelli, if you guys have had any questions that have come up in like author support, people have sent us by email, feel free to chime in with one of those. But I am going to grab this one from Cole. So a lot of blurbs seem to hit the hook, then divert the author to the author's credentials. Is this a recommended pattern? What if you can't say you're a New York Times best-selling author or whatever accomplishment?
I don't necessarily think that for me, I wouldn't put that in my blurb. I mean, maybe it would be on the cover, or I mean, if I had a USA Today or something, I would definitely put that out there, but I don't know if I needed to like switch away from, and maybe this is a genre thing, from what my story is about to a credential to say USA Today or New York Times or anything like that. But maybe that's a genre expectation, and maybe that's, because in romance, it's about the story, it's about the characters, and if you have, the best-selling any tags or anything like that or accomplishments, you should put it out there, and it's pretty cool. You should do that. But I don't necessarily know that that needs to be diverted in the blurb. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that, like I said, maybe it's a genre expectation or something.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in nonfiction, especially if you're looking a particular topic, I don't know, nutrition or politics or history, you know, after the blurb, because it's still important to let the reader know what they're getting in the book. Then let me know who you are, what qualifies you to talk about this topic. But I'm gonna keep it real. When I see that mess in romance, and we do see it, how some of them will format so they have blurbs from other authors and reviews and New York Times, and I'm like, I'm not even gonna bother trying to read your blurb now because you didn't. Okay, let me stop.
No, I think
It's about.
right. In my opinion, I think the blurb should be an elevator pitch for your book. It should focus on what your book is about. I think if you're going to mention your credentials, which is fair enough to do, uh, I think that falls outside of the blurb. I think it shouldn't be intermixed with it. I think it should be its own separate thing. And yeah, keep it to a minimum. I wonder how much of that stuff is just driven by ego. 'Cause you see a lot of like in traditional publishing too. It's very common in traditional publishing. Like, well, we got to get somebody else, a quote from somebody else saying how great this book is, and we've got to, put their credentials on here so they know this is a legit thing. And I think that's a traditional publishing mindset. But I don't think that stuff really has that much impact on readers, in all honesty. I think from in that context, maybe it's certain authors, not even all authors, because I'm sure there are plenty of authors who they don't even handle that aspect. But for some authors, it's like, make sure, you put my credentials on there. It's maybe their ego that's driving that. So I don't know, there's all different kinds of motivations potentially. So I don't know that that's necessarily something that you would want to mimic because you don't know why they're doing that. I don't think it's necessarily because it's effective. I think sometimes it's done for other reasons. And so, strictly speaking, your blurb should be an elevator pitch for your book. And if you're going to rely on, oh yeah, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author, what's that telling the reader about the book? What's that
I
the
think
read?
relevant though is New York Times, whatever. I mean, especially in fiction, and there are places in Author Central where you can input this data, but if you're writing in a niche where own voices is would would be a strong selling point, like say you write romance with neurodivergent heroines and you are yourself neurodivergent. I mean, I think that's a legit selling point, because then I know I'm going to get maybe I don't want to say more genuine experience. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase
No,
that.
no, I think I know.
Just say
Yeah.
whatever you want to offend as many people as possible.
Emma has no filters. Emma's filter.
I think we get what you mean, right? Like if the author, even if it's fiction, if the author has some kind of personal connection to the content, then yeah, I think that's compelling. is what I
Yeah.
so, no, I understand what you're saying. No, I don't think that's always necessary. Like obviously we can sympathize with other people who have different experiences than us, even as authors, but yeah, if they do have some relevant experience, or it's based on a true story, so to speak, right? That is their life. Yeah, I think that's relevant. And I think you could I honestly, to me, as a reader, that would be more impactful to me than somebody saying, I'm a US Today best-selling author, or I won this award. I don't really, if I'm going to read a book, that's not the stuff that I personally um, look at, or signals to me this is going to be a book that I'm going to enjoy.
Yeah.
Sense. I mean, Kelly, back in the day, people used to get USAT and all of that through collabs.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, now everybody is a USAT. It's like, yeah, because you joined a box set, boo. And
Mhm.
okay, enough said.
Yeah, yeah. No,
No,
hey,
I mean, there's nothing wrong. I think there is like people have goals, and being recognized for having done a good job on your book. I think there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just wouldn't put it in a blurb. I would put it on the cover. I would
yeah,
definitely, under my name or whatever, say USA Today or whatever. I mean, if you got the New York Times, then you probably aren't super worried about
yeah,
the blurbs.
yeah.
But I don't know, maybe that's just me like thinking out of that. But I mean, if you have something that you're proud of, you put it on the cover. But I just think the blurb is meant to convey, it's meant to hook the reader in and say you want to read this book, not because who I am, but what this book's about.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably more relevant.
I do know some authors though where like award chasing was motivating for them. And so
Yeah.
they would write and submit to different awards, so forth, and that to them was motivating. And I don't want to discount that at all, because I think that's great for some authors. And
Mhm.
if that motivates you and you win one of those awards, you should absolutely plaster it all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, to come back to what Kelly said, your blurb has a purpose, and it's not to tout your accomplishments. It is to, be an elevator pitch for your book. All right. Oh, sorry, you had something else to say there, Emma?
No, I was saying what would be really interesting is if Brandon Sanderson, I'm tempted to go and like, what does he put in his blurbs? But
Yeah.
I digress.
Well, and I think I made this point yesterday in the webinar too, which is that if you look at the big names, they're going to be doing different things than you might be doing or be able to do. And, I personally don't do a whole lot of that. And uh, there's other factors, right? I wouldn't go look at Brandon Sanderson's blurbs and be like, well, if I copy his style, obviously not copy and paste, but like copy his style, I'm going to be successful. If I do Brandon Sanderson things, I'm going to become Brandon Sanderson. Well, at the stage he's at now, uh, you can't really do those things, right? Because nobody cares yet, right? He's got a fan base, so he could do a lot of things, and it's not going to necessarily disrupt his career that much,
Yeah.
so I think you got to maybe look towards somebody who's a little bit more uh proximal to where you are in your career, who's somebody who's like a few steps ahead of you instead of like miles ahead.
When
um
I think about that with when I was first starting to publish and was thinking about covers and blurbs, and the big advice was go on Amazon, go to the top 100, pull, from your niche, your genre, pull books out of that and see and look at covers. And I still think that's a really great idea. Like that is you should be on point. That's how you do it. One of the things that, I didn't take into consideration was that there were trad published books mixed in with those other books, with all the self pubs, and they also have something different. Like I would recommend with covers and blurbs, like when you're looking to say, okay, can I look at what is really catching readers and what are readers really liking about certain blurbs, and you go in and you read them, you probably want to take it into consideration whether or not that book is self-published or traditionally published, because trad publishing houses have a different marketing strategy, different process. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it's something to take into consideration. Like there's nothing wrong at all with either. But when you're doing this on your own and you're doing self-publishing, you don't have a team of marketers that are going to push your book in your cover and put it onto things. So that's one of the things that I like learned kind of the hard way, because my first cover looked a lot like the genre that I saw was coming out, but that I realized that a lot of those were were traditionally published by big houses, and that's wasn't the greatest strategy for my particular situation. So just, that's something to keep in mind.
No, absolutely. They have a lot more leverage in other areas to sell books.
Yeah.
Than the cover and the blurb. And so it's not that sometimes those things are an afterthought, because there are obviously traditionally published books that have beautiful covers on them, and very well crafted blurbs, but you don't always know if it's the cover or the blurb that's selling the book when you look at one of those books, because they have marketing and they have so much else to leverage. I think what you could do almost, and what comes to mind is like, yeah, go look at your genre and your niche and look at the top 100 and take all those blurbs and then do something completely different than what everybody else is doing, because you'll stand out. And it might not work, but you'll stand out.
I don't know.
Now, I don't mean to defy all expectations, but to do something different than what everybody else is doing, because how many times do they look at an Amazon page and then they're like, oh yeah, the blurb, whatever, okay, cool, and they kind of just skim it and then give up because it's the same kind of thing over and over again. And so you break that. It's a pattern interrupt, essentially. You break that pattern, they get to your book and they're like, what? Okay, what did they say? And like, even if you start off with something like shocking, I don't know, it depends on the genre. That was just a
Oh
thought.
my God. I wonder if you're a trailblazer archetype, Jack, because that's such a, and I think I'm getting the archetype right. I think that's such a trailblazer thing to say.
I will take that at face value. And yeah. All right. So our next question is from Angela. I need to set up a mailing list. I am struggling with this. It fills me with anxiety. Not sure why, other than that I don't understand a lot of the instructions. So not strictly speaking a question, but I saw this, and Angela, I can totally understand the anxiety when you're just getting it started and setting it up and all that's involved. And so how do you deal with that is really the question. All of us have mailing lists of some size or another. We don't have to share that here, right? We're not measuring mailing lists. It's not what we're doing. But yeah, there's bound to be some anxiety about it, for sure. So that's normal. I would start with that.
Anxiety doesn't go away, but there is one tip or trick or whatever philosophy. Number one, take it slowly, but number two, do it right the first time. Because especially with me, there's a temptation to just get something out there. Let's get going. But right now I'm in a phase where I'm starting over from scratch because I want to optimize everything. So I've completely torn apart all my newsletter sequences, all my graphics, everything, my entire plan, and I'm redoing it from scratch. And I've been drinking.
Emma's always honest. Emma's always. I don't know that we're giving it advice on mental health here explicitly. I do have to say, the BookFunnel podcast is not a mental health advice podcast.
With electrolytes and water, you never know.
Okay, you weren't specific, but
But I think if you have that, it's such a wonderful opportunity to be at the start of this journey, because you can really sit down and think about what you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And Do it slowly, but do it right. So you don't have to be like Emma and go back 10 years later.
And tear it apart.
Yeah.
Because, and credit to all of Jack's wonderful newsletter webinars. It's like water on stones, drip, drip, drip. And every time we're in one of those webinars moderating, and I'm like, damn it, Jack.
Now I got to go tear that apart.
Oh, and that, and I've done it myself too. What's the saying? The shoemaker, or is it the cobbler has no shoes or something like that? No, I do the same thing when I look at my own newsletter, and I'm like, oh gosh, I could optimize this and this and this and all that. But
I think when I first started out, the first thing I should have done was put that sequence together, the welcome sequence, it's still, it's not great. It's not there. Like, when you haven't published anything yet, you don't realize how much actual time you have to set things up to get yourself going into some sort of, system, so that when you're actually, worrying about ads and worrying about, and that you're doing release parties and you're doing this and you're doing that, you're doing all the things, you're not going to sit down and go, okay, it's time for me to dig in to my mailing list and put my welcome sequence together.
you
Like,
guys,
do
you guys
those
got a
things
party?
before.
You guys got a
Yeah, we do
party?
parties. Yeah, it's good.
I didn't. Nobody threw me a party.
Oh, it's not a party like,
I know. I know.
restaurants or anything.
Yeah.
But like, you're doing all these things, and and then you're going back to writing. And before you publish your first book, the best time to put your welcome sequence together is when no one's on that list yet, and you don't have, like, you build it and you put it together, and you have time to think about it, and you have time to put a system in place, so that when it's time for you to start gaining mailing list people, and you will feel comfortable that they're getting value as they sign up, and then things are coming to them later. And one of the other things I didn't do when I started, and I still, Jack and Emma know this, reader magnets. Put your reader magnets together before you
Yep.
publish. Like, I did not even think that was a thing. Like, I didn't pay attention to it. And if you join a BookFunnel newsletter builder and you are in KU and you have no way to give away your book for free, like, have something tied to your series or your book, whatever it is, and then you have something that you are able to give away and build your newsletter and create that interest in your stories, so that people will pick up your book and read it. And so that's my my big one is, before you publish, do some of this work so that your life is easier later.
I just made a note that
Uh,
we need to follow up on Kelly's reader magnets with each episode. So we will not forget this.
mm.
No, no, no. In a not in a mean-spirited way.
Of course, I know.
Do something we promise we're going to optimize. Like, if we're going to be like, Kelly, you have to make this amount of progress, then we all have to do that, to be fair.
No, absolutely. And I think we could do some fun challenges. Like, if Kelly's writing a reader magnet, maybe the two of us should be writing a new reader magnet too.
There you go. And
Say that.
then it's a BookFunnel reader magnet party. See,
Yeah,
we'll throw you a party.
oh, yay. I get one. I think the one thing about this question that I do want to kind of refocus on is where Angela's saying, I'm not sure why I'm feeling this anxiety, other than that I don't understand a lot of the instructions. So if it's coming down to just like the technical aspects of like setting up a newsletter or a mailing list, it can be absolutely daunting, especially if it's not something that you've done before. So I would say, yeah, you want to do it right the first time, and the anxiety is never going to go away. So you have to kind of dive into it anyway, and then just go with it. But I would also say that um, choosing the right platform that makes sense for you. Like, if you haven't done so yet, I would open up trial accounts with a few of the big ones, and tinker with them. And when you get in there, without like having a mailing list set up, and obviously without paying for any of them, just do free accounts and just tinker with them and see like, oh, okay, this one like makes sense to me.
Mhm.
I can navigate this one. I know where to find everything. That's why I personally use MailerLite, and it's because I used MailChimp for a while and it was clunky to me personally. And then I switched to MailerLite and I'm like, yeah, I know where everything is. I like it. I've experimented with a few others, and it's there's some features that other mailing list services have that MailerLite doesn't, or they do something better than MailerLite does. But MailerLite just makes sense to my brain, so I stick with it because it's comfortable. So I think trying a few things, and then if it is an issue of like the instructions of like going through it, like we're here to help, man. So I would reach out to us at author support, and support at bookfunnel.com, and we can help you out getting that set up. Even if you're not connecting it to BookFunnel, we can give you some advice on that if you have questions more specifically on like what all those aspects of a mailing list mean, and so forth, because it is daunting. I totally understand that.
Well, we have that webinar too that's already in the video library that they can
Right.
check out that we did. Jack actually put together a newsletter in MailerLite. Like he
Mhm.
created a whole thing. So
What? And
check that
didn't
one
we
out.
do one? Didn't we do one where we like integrated MailerLite? It
Yep.
wasn't a We didn't set up MailerLite, like setting up a mailing list per se.
No, it was
But
we did the integration, but I think you did show a newsletter, didn't you?
yeah, yeah,
How
I
to
think
make a
I need to get
newsletter?
those up. I need to get those up here on the channel. I think those would be some good ones to have up here on the channel. But they are in the video library. And there will be a link. I'll make sure there's a link to our video library in the description of this video too. All right. And now we've come to our story behind the story segment, where we talk about our guests' creative endeavors. And it just so happens that we are the guests in this first episode of the BookFunnel podcast. In future episodes, we're going to have other authors on here and other creative individuals who may not be authors explicitly, or who have other creative endeavors that they're pursuing. And we will be talking about that. And so for this very special episode, I thought we could talk about how each of us kind of got into self-publishing, and then maybe also how we wound up here at BookFunnel, because I think that would be kind of relevant, because for me, those two stories are like intertwined. They are one journey for me personally. And I know too, even for both of you, they are to an extent as well. But I thought that's where we could start off with for today. So whoever wants to go first and share, how did you discover self-publishing, and what brought you here?
Well, you're the OG, Jack. You should go first.
Okay. I mean, if you're gonna tell me to, um, I don't like to speak first if everybody else wants to, but so I began writing. Well, to be fair, this actually goes all the way back to when I was 3 years old. Everybody cue the rolling of eyes. Right. So I have always been telling stories. As a kid, before I could write and read, I would draw pictures and then dictate to family members, like, write down this on this page because we're making a book. At one point in time, I was making my own comic books, and copying them on my parents' photocopier machine at their family business to sell those comic books to their patrons of their business for a quarter. It did not go very well. Um, so I've always been telling stories, and for whatever reason, the fascination of writing books, even though like I didn't really like to read, it was kind of weird. And I started a school project in high school. I was 15 years old, where I was writing a story. The project was not supposed to be a book. It was not supposed to be some huge thing, but I just kept working on it, and working on it, and eventually I lost that book in a hard drive crash and had to rewrite it, which was probably a good thing. It was probably a good thing. I developed a lot of a lot of my writing chops, rewriting all of that. And then at one point, my dad, because I had been working on it for a few years, I'm in college now, and he's like, "What are you gonna do with this thing? Like, what? You're just writing for, and kind of, he wasn't being critical. It was kind of like, you should do something with this, or like, if you're gonna put time to this, you should be aiming for something." And so I looked into like traditional publishing and that sort of thing, and very discouraging and whatnot. And then a friend of mine introduced me to J.A. Conrath
Yeah.
and the entire world of self-publishing. And I'm like, oh, wow, you can do this. This is a thing now. This is not, I mean, people still laugh at you for it at that time, but not as much as they used to. And it's like, okay, I can go down this road. That's cool. And the first thing that I knew you had to do was, well, you needed an editor. And so I reached out to I'm gonna drop some names here. Hopefully I'm remembering them all right. I reached out to another author. I believe his name was Moses Sirigar, if I'm not mistaken, to ask him, like, who did you use for your editor? Because I'm an aspiring author. I want to know, what I believe it was. I believe I reached out to him. Might have been somebody else. I do think that he and I reached out to him for some reason at one point in time, but I can't recall. And he told me, well, Derek Pryor was his editor. So I reached out to Derek Pryor. He's also an author as well. And he's like, well, I'd love to help you out, but I'm actually fully booked right now. So how about you use my editor? And he connected me with a man named Harry DeWolf, who actually, it would be fun to have him on as a guest for this podcast. It'd be great. And we started working together. It was just a little snippet here. If you're looking for an editor and you send them a sample chapter and what you get back does not knock your pants off, you shouldn't hire them. I probably sent my sample chapter to a dozen or so editors, and Harry pointed out things to me that I had not even considered. He was a literary editor, so he's not just looking at like typos and so forth. And he blew my mind in just that one short little bit of feedback I got from him. So I hired him, and we're working together. And at some point, he's like, well, I know this guy who's kind of in a similar situation to you, and I'm also working with him. I think the two of you should talk, because I think you have some, experience you can share with each other. I think it'd be helpful for the both of you. And that guy turned out to be Damon Courtney, who at the time had not created BookFunnel yet. This was before BookFunnel. We're talking like 2012, 2013, something like that. And so we got to chatting. We'd have weekly chats and so forth, just talk about what we were doing with self-publishing and whatnot. We kind of lost touch with each other actually around the time he started BookFunnel. I had some other stuff going on too. But we had worked on a project together a little bit, or started to. And then in 2019, I reached out to him again. I'm like, hey, I didn't know if you wanted to work on this together again. He's like, yeah, that would be fun. By the way, do you need a job? And I'm summarizing. It's not exactly how it happened, but that's to condense it. That's pretty much what happened. And so, yeah, I started working for BookFunnel in 2019 in reader support, and then eventually moved on to author support, and have been going, ever since. And then everything's, expanded from there. So my self-publishing journey and my BookFunnel journey are like one and the same, essentially, because we had the same editor. We were kind of at the same stage. I think he had I can't remember if he had published his first or second book at that point in time. I can't remember where exactly we were, but we just clicked and had some good discussions about stuff. And we did work on that project a little bit together. He had to kind of step aside from it, which, no hard feelings or anything, but just BookFunnel was taking up so much of his time.
Just
And
this little thing called BookFunnel,
yeah,
little side
yeah,
hobby.
exactly. That thing. And it's been a pleasure and an honor to know him and to be a part of the team, and I don't take that for granted, that the amount of trust that was placed in me at certain points during BookFunnel's growth, because I've been here not from the very beginning. I'm not like the first employee or anything, but I've been around long enough that I've seen BookFunnel grow, and it's kind of amazing. So yeah, that's my journey. But
What happened to that project, that book y'all was working on?
yeah, so I continued with it. So it is my current series, Scions of Oth, that I've been writing. I do it in like seasons. So the first season is the first 9 books. Those have been out there for a while. That's kind of what we worked on together. I did the writing, and Damon and I, we split up where we kind of plotted it together, and then I did the writing part because I had the time to do the writing. So it's still written by me. And then I've continued into season 2 now, which is all on my own. And I've got the first where 4 books out, 3 books, 3 books. The 4th one is pending release. I've had to push it back a little bit, sadly, but the first 3 books in there, and then I'm writing other stuff in that universe too. So yeah, so it's out there. It's science fiction space opera inspired by Battlestar Galactica, primarily, is what I tell people, with a chess sort of theme to everything. So if you see book covers that have like weird like ships in the shape of a horse, you'd be like, what is that? I think, Emma, the first time you saw
No,
it,
but I saw one of your ads, and that robot, like, I would take him home to mama. So, I mean, I don't know.
that was a different
Like,
one.
what kind of sci-fi are you writing?
No, not that kind of sci-fi, no. Well, and actually, it's, the knight is a chess piece. There's a chess theme to it. There's ships that look like bishops and queens and all that stuff, and they don't stand out as much because they don't have like an animal head on them. The next book, for those who know like chess history, the bishop used to be an elephant.
Hmm.
And the next book,
Is a spaceship with an elephant?
it's an elephant. It is just a giant elephant head. Yeah, it's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
It's no, I know. It's a little, it's intentionally a little like, what the heck am I looking at here? And
I didn't know that.
maybe that is my trailblazer streak there.
There you go. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
I'll have to show that cover off at some point, because it's not. I was not going for like I was not going for, oh, what cover is going to sell the most books. It was like, no, this is true to the universe, and
Yeah.
I'm going to go with it. So
There you go.
anyway.
Well, I was a teacher, and I had worked in the classroom for 10 years, and then I did 4 years at an online school. And that there was a transition there where I was either going to go back to the classroom, or I was going to, have to do something else. And I decided I wanted to make some changes. And so I actually went into real estate, and I was selling houses and, working with people. And one of the things that afforded me was time to, I was always, when I was a kid, I was like a huge reader. Like, I read everything. I just devoured books. I loved it. And I wanted to, go into, do English or something. And, there's always those voices of people going like, well, if you're going to go to college, it has to be for a job. And that's true. Like,
Yeah.
you hopefully you have a career. And I had and loved, the idea of teaching. And then, it was a little bit more strenuous of work than I had wanted to do. And so I got to a point where, yeah, you have summers off, but I was doing reading, and it was because I was getting my next endorsement, or I was putting in, time for like what my students were reading. So I read all the Percy Jackson books, and I read all of the, I knew all of those kinds of books, which I loved, by the way. Those were great books. And I didn't read for pleasure anymore for myself, because again, you've got kids and career and business or all the stuff's going on. And so when I went into real estate, I had an incredibly much more flexible schedule. I was meeting with clients and I was working on, that kind of stuff. But um, it just allowed me time to really start thinking about being that creative. And it
Right.
allowed that creativeness that I was, picking up books that I wanted to read and reading them and going, oh gosh, I love this book, or I love the idea of this. And then I also was able to start doing audiobooks. And I did a lot of driving, because I was selling houses and where I live, I have a huge range. I could be 60 miles away selling a house in another town. And so I'd be driving out there and listening to books on, the audiobooks was really helpful. And I started doing it when I was doing housework and that sort of, so I really got back into reading and writing. And then I'd always had these creative ideas. I just never wrote them down, or I would just journal them a little bit, but I didn't actually sit and start really like plotting books and all of that. And so these characters came into my head, the storyline came into my head, things just started to come into place. And I went, you know what? I think it'd be really fun to just try it. Like what, give it a shot, right? So I start writing and I was just doing it at night. The kids would go to bed and husband's in bed and I just, okay, I'm going to give it a go. Um and then I met some people who, just other authors and groups in Facebook and um, you know, trying to figure out exactly, what this was all about. Self-publishing was pretty much where I was seeing a lot of the storylines coming out of was not through traditional publishing. And I did look into trad publishing and doing like queries, and actually I think
Mhm.
I'd started drafting a query letter. But then I realized I just wanted to have more say in what my book was going to be. And, I had a cliffhanger in my book and I had a second book, and they were like, yeah, if your first book doesn't sell, your second book is dead. And that was kind of one of the things that I was like, I don't know about that. Like I don't want them to have someone else have control over my stories. And maybe it was I'm not much of a control freak, but maybe that little piece of me was like, don't do that. And then I met some really wonderful authors, and I beta read for the first time with Emily McIntyre, and I read her stories, her first small town romance, fabulous series. And I was like, she was wonderful and she was encouraging. She was like, you know what, you should do it. Like you have a story, just put it out there. So I was doing beta reading and I had my own story and I started sharing that with people, and getting that out there. And then I met another author named Greer Rivers. And she and I are like, I mean, I just love her to death. She was a former attorney, and I had legal stuff in my book. My characters are going through legal stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, you're going to be my best friend. And she was like, she was so helpful and wonderful. Like, she and I are still like, she's my person. If I had need advice or whatever, I go to her. And it was so encouraging to have someone else who was just starting out, because her first series, I beta read her first series, and then she started helping me with mine.
Right.
And just kind of having like someone to kind of go back and forth with about, like, I could really actually do this. Like I could do this.
Right.
And so yeah, I got into self-publishing, and there was a handful of other authors that I worked with that, just being, because we were starting out at the same time, kind of in the same place. We hadn't already published, or we were getting close to publishing. And so that, I think, really, finding a tribe of people that are encouraging and helpful. And, that's a really, really important thing, I think, is I don't think I would have done it if I didn't have a group of friends that were encouraging and wonderful. And so my first book came out, and my cover wasn't quite right, and my blurb was good, I think, but it just didn't like, I was the long game, right? I had friends who were some of my friends, they were masters at marketing. They were so good at what they did, and they were just skyrocketing, right? And my book was like, it's just a trickle. And I think that's important to know, is that you can have a great book. You can have, everything else. You could spend the money. You can do, I paid way too much for my first cover. I paid, I didn't have a reader magnet. I didn't know about BookFunnel promos. I didn't have a reading list. Like or mailing list. So there's a lot of things that, you're going to make those mistakes, and that's okay. But that was it. And then, kind of like Emma, the real estate stuff was, it's very feast or famine. So you sell a house, you can make some decent money, but then that's it. And then you have to sell the next house. And so a lot of that building of that business it was really tough. And you just didn't know if you were going to have, a good month or not, because I would have a month where, sales would go through and would fall out. And
Yep.
you would think, oh, well, I'm going to have X amount of money coming in, and that's going to be great. And, not that until the check was in hand, you never counted on it. And so, when I was going through, I had taken Becca Syme's class and I'm in her Facebook group, and I saw a posting for BookFunnel. And I loved BookFunnel. Like, I met them at 20 books. I had gone to 20 books and saw, briefly talked to them at the booth. And I think I talked to Julie. And everybody knows, like, this was a great company to work with as an author. And so I applied, and I think it was the same thing I think Emma had talked about earlier, where she said, Becca Syme said, some of you just need to get a full-time job or a part-time job so that you can take that pressure of your finances off. And I took that to heart. And actually, I was getting my license ready to go back to the classroom. I had let my educator license expire, which we have a shortage here, so I would have had no problem getting a job here in my town. And so I was in the plan of getting my I actually had applied for my substitute teaching license, and I was going to use that until I got in somewhere. And then I got the call that I had an interview, and here I am.
Yep.
And it's the best thing ever. It's the best job ever. Yes, I love it
And
here.
I
Now
remember
life.
What's that?
Now it's for life, man.
It
Yep.
is for life. Yep.
No, but your real estate experience was what stood out to me. I'm like, okay, she did real estate. She can and teaching too actually was another part of it. But the real estate, like that's tough, and you've got
Mm.
to put in the like you were doing it yourself too. So
Mhm.
that was I remember that. It really stood
Yeah,
out.
I didn't have a team. I didn't want to be because a lot of the teams in my community, I don't know how it is everywhere, but in my community, if you're in a team, like, you're in the office at 7 a.m. and you're making phone calls all morning to cold call people. And like, they're those like go-getter, like, kind of people. And I'm like, I really want the flexible schedule so I could be with my kids more, and I can go to their, do things with them. And that was, what really drew me to the real estate. But yeah, I mean, it's a hustle for sure. And again, I mean, I remember this one month, and it was like in the summer, and I think I had 4 deals, and I was so excited because that's like, I mean, that was like almost my whole salary at one point. And they were big deals, and all but one fell through.
Mhm.
And it was like, okay, that, and you pay for all the things. You pay for the photography, you pay for it. If it falls through, you pay for it. So it was kind of like, And then there's some people out there that are a little less than, ethical in that business as well. So having to deal with that was a little bit, of a challenge. And so when it was time to change, I was like, okay, well, I need to do something. So I'm going to go back to the classroom, and I am really, really grateful that I saw that post in Becca
Yeah.
Sims group.
So Emma, you've had a change of scenery here,
I'm
but
at work office, but every seat was too close to someone else. And I'm like, if I start talking about my erotica days, I don't want people looking at me crazy. Because
no,
that
you're fine.
started out. So
Right, well, go ahead. Tell us your backstory.
I
What's
was teaching high school biology, but I had to transition from that because I was having baby number 4. And then she was nursing, ecological on-demand nursing, which some of you know is a full-time job, and the child don't pay you for it. So maybe one day. But I was in a master's degree program for special education, and I had 2 weeks left to go. Not 2 weeks left. I had to do student teaching in order to, no childcare. Made too much money for any state subsidy, but the cost of childcare was more than we could afford. So I'm like, I got to do something, man. And I'd been a writer for years. And J.A. Conrath, the OG, I remember growing up reading his blog posts about going to local indie bookstores and used bookstores and pimping his books. I'm like, oh, there's a path to do this. And then Kindle comes along. Um, God, that shows you all how old we all are.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
Yeah, you're the baby in the family. You're the baby.
I know.
But I think it started with J.A. Conrath and then Nano, and then you just slowly go down the rabbit hole and you learn a little bit at a time. And then one day I was like, I can write a 5K hot wife short. New authors, let me tell you something. Goodreads never forgets. I'm just gonna put that out there. Goodreads never forgets. So be careful. Kelli, you spent way too much on your first cover. I DIY'd mine, and baby, okay. Yeah, you can imagine. But it went from there, got into erotica, Dirty Discourse, joined the Dirty Discourse forum, and much love to Dirty Discourse because I don't think I would have been publishing without them. And then from there, it was really much money motivations at first, even though you have the love of writing, but it's like there's nothing I can do with this nursing child. Like, who's going to take care of her? I can't go get a part-time job. Who's going to take care of her? So it's like I've got to use the laptop, and I have my imagination, and I can surf the net and figure this stuff out. And so that's what Mama did. And 10 years later, we're listening to Becca. Love Becca. Becca don't know, saved so many lives. Some of you all need a day job. Because I'd been living off royalties for so many years, and single mom, divorced mom, and everybody knows housing is going up, gas is going up, food is going up. At a certain point, it's like you can only do as much as you can do. There's only so much optimizing you can do. There's only so many productivity classes you can do. There's only so much you can do until at a certain point you're like, and then at that point, Becca's like, I saw the post. It was like 3 a.m. I think it was really early in the morning. I saw it. I'm like, And I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to apply at first. I'm like, there's no way in the world they would. But I applied, and they called, and okay, I'm not going to cry, but I am.
Go for it.
I mean,
You're gonna make me cry.
David and Julie and Becca, for posting that and putting that thought in my head because I'm stubborn. But I mean, I've been a BookFunnel girly since the beginning. So I really believed in the product. And of course, I believe in the project even more now that I've experienced the team behind it. And I mean, ride or die, baby. And if anybody wants to know, genuinely, the people behind this company are good people. Like, you should be proud of giving them your little $15 a month. Like, it's it's genuine team, genuine product. Like, and it just came in a point in my life where something had to give. It's almost, sometimes I wonder if, I don't know, this is almost like an answer to a prayer.
Mhm.
And I haven't regretted it one day. I mean, some of
Yeah.
the days are rough, but and sometimes we cuss and sometimes we drink, but it's like it's all in love. Like, if you're a family, sometimes
Yeah.
you're like, but it's love. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an incredible place to work. And I agree. Like, I was at this point where same thing where it was like, I have to do something. And I mean, I liked teaching. I did like teaching, but I didn't love some of the things that went on with the administrations and things like that, the time they take from you, and there's just a lot. And um but I was gonna, I was gonna do it. I was guaranteed a place, and I'm so really thankful just for this experience. And now I'm doing podcasts, which
Yeah.
oh,
Not what you expected, right?
not what I thought I was gonna be doing, and I love it. This has been great. This has been fun.
Yeah.
I was a little nervous because I'm like, what am I gonna say? And it just feels like a nice conversation. I love it.
No, I remember when you both joined
people
the
get to
team.
do this. I mean, how many people get to really, really say they love their careers? And like, work-life balance is such a myth because it's like, my work is my life and my life is my work. Like, what?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when you both joined the team, and it was, I mean, before then, BookFunnel felt smaller. Because adding two people at the time was actually it was a big deal. It really it really was. We only had plans to add one person, and then we had both of you, and we're like, let's just hire both. And but it worked out well. It felt like BookFunnel. That was when BookFunnel, I don't want to say really grew, because obviously BookFunnel was already big, but there was definitely, there was an expansion even from the behind the curtain side of things. I don't know that anybody on, like, any of our users would have necessarily like noticed, like, oh, they must have hired some new people because, this, that, or the other. No, it was like on the back end of things, behind the curtain. It felt like, for me, in particular, like it really had become more of a family. And it was like, I remember training you guys, and it was just such a natural fit. You both just were attuned exactly to the job. You were both the right choice, and yeah, I'm glad you're both here. So it just so happens that you guys responded to the same ad and that we put out there, or post, it was on Facebook, I think, or where was it? But
Yeah,
I
back
was I wasn't involved with that, so I don't know where exactly you came from, but I was there for
Well,
the interviews, and I remember all those. And it was.
yeah, mine was memorable because I looked like I was kissing up because I have this thing. Look at this. I had this from 20 books. And I
Yes.
got it in 2022, and I told you I went to the booth. And it was sitting here. It was like here-ish.
Yep. Yep.
And I thought my camera was turned a little more. And so Jack's like, hey, I really like, or maybe it was Ryan, I don't remember, but like, hey, I really like the thing you got behind. I'm like, oh no. Like, I thought it was a way. I was so nervous that I didn't even pay attention. Once I actually got on the screen, everybody was there. So I didn't have time to like
It's the only reason you got the job, Kelli.
It's because I was like, look. I still keep it here though.
Yeah. And now we're gonna be at 20 books. It's not 20 books anymore. Excuse me.
Author Nation.
Author Nation. It's Author Nation. Excuse me. I mean, it's like the spiritual successor to 20 books, but right, carrying the torch forward. But we're going to be at that conference all together this year. It's gonna be fun. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's going to be a wild ride. I think I went to 20 books in 2022, and it's a lot of information, a lot of things. And I think Author Nation's going to be very similar.
Yeah.
And I feel like being on this side of it and being like, okay, we're going to be at the booth, so come see us. And I'm like, what is that? Again, what is my life? But yeah, like, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we have some really cool things planned, I think. And I think Damon's speaking, and
yeah.
So
it'll be good. Come see us if you happen to be there. But all right. Well, we're going to wrap things up here, folks. The first episode of the BookFunnel podcast is in the books now, and we'll get it edited and uploaded to the channel here shortly, so that this remains kind of recent and so forth. And we're going to continue to do this with some new guests and so forth here on the channel. I want to thank Emma and Kelli for being here today. Not that you had a choice, but but no, I do want to thank you for both being a part of the team. And I think I couldn't do this by myself. Couldn't do this podcast without you. You two make it what it is. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time too, because I know that's the biggest aspect of a podcast is the time. Commitment to it, and we all are busy with things we got to do, and so carving out time is not always the easiest thing to do. So I want to thank you both for that, and yeah, we'll just wrap things up here, and we'll see you all next time, because there will be a next time. This is not over. We're gonna keep going. So all right, but anyway, you folks, if you want to go, you guys can say your thank yous too here if you want.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah. All righty.
Come see us, Author Nation.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.